Well, good evening, everybody. It is 5 p.m. and we are at our November 2nd work session for the City of Iowa City. Welcome to all the counselors. I did want to make mention that our Mayor Pro Tem Salih will not join us for the work session, but she'll be here for the formal meeting today. And we will jump right into our work session, and we'll have our Assistant City Manager, I'm sorry, the assistant to the city manager, Rachel, help us with our discussion on the state of Iowa legislative priorities. So we'll just jump right in there.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Kelly, did you want to share the memo or would you like me to?
I didn't know that you were going to have me pull it up. So if you have it handy, that'd be great.
All right. Might make it a little bit easier for us. All right. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the memo that I shared with you in the information packet for today's work session. So this is just a draft list of priorities for the 2021 State of Iowa legislative session. In the past, City Council has adopted your state legislative priorities by a formal resolution. So it's our recommendation that you will do so at the next City Council meeting on November 17th. I'll also quickly mention that we do have a special work session scheduled for the morning of Monday, November 23rd. That's scheduled to start at 8 a.m. And we've invited our state delegation and our contracted lobbyists. So that will be a great opportunity too for you to ask any questions about legislative activity in the upcoming session. But for tonight, would like to start discussion about these priorities, get a little direction from you all so we can prepare that resolution for the next meeting. I tried my best to lay these out in context of your strategic plan. So I'll try to run through these and be brief, and then we'd just like to hear your thoughts on it. So I'll go ahead and dive in. First, for our strategic plan objective of demonstrating leadership in climate action, we're just expressing support for climate action initiatives. Specifically, we're interested in having the state develop a statewide climate action plan. And while it's actually an administrative action rather than a legislative one, we'd also like to encourage the state to adopt the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code. These next two align with your objective to advance social justice, racial equity, and human rights. These will be really important for us in the upcoming session, especially as we are developing our own plan to restructure the police. So in alignment with your 17-point resolution you passed in June to address systemic racism, we have listed here that we're encouraging the state to support criminal justice reform measures. These include increasing authority for the Community Police Review Board, decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana, and state standardized and automated collection and analysis of race and ethnicity data during traffic stops. This last one is also a recommendation that was included in the policy recommendations released by the Governor's Focus Committee on Criminal Justice Reform that was released last week. And then we also have listed here just that we are also encouraging the state to amend the Iowa hate crimes law to include harassment as an enhanceable offense in alignment with our own local ordinance. Another big piece of the conversation then here on our next one is just going to be, well, another big piece of the conversation around community policing has been how to provide better response and service to individuals who are experiencing a crisis. So locally, our police department has been involved in a really small pilot phase using a crisis report system, which basically enables law enforcement to document their contact with an individual when they are responding to someone who is experiencing a crisis, and then being able to share that information with licensed healthcare or social service providers when they're making a referral, or simply just to improve any future contact they would have with the individual. So like I said, they've been in kind of a small pilot phase, and the last big step of this is that they need to get a change to state code to ensure confidentiality protections. These reports would obviously have identifying information, so the way the current language reads wouldn't guarantee that we could maintain confidentiality of these reports, especially if we were to share them with other law enforcement agencies in the county. And then going along with that is just kind of acknowledging how critical it is to just in general expand and strengthen our mental health resources in our state. So we're encouraging the state to take actions which will support the proposed 6 judicial district civil mental health court. And then of course, make other investments that would be needed to support that kind of a system. Assistive outpatient treatment, increasing the reimbursement rate for mental health care providers, and then just making sure we have an adequate number of psychiatric hospital beds too. So next, we have our objective to invest in public infrastructure, facilities, and fiscal reserves. So this is a priority you're probably familiar with from years past, but we'll have a renewed emphasis on it this year as cities are grappling with additional financial pressures from the pandemic. As you know, the 2013 property tax reform rolled back commercial and industrial property tax. And the state has been reimbursing these localities through what is called the backfill. And these backfill payments have helped us control property tax rates and service levels. And there have been discussions at the state level of either drastically reducing or phasing out these backfill payments. So we just want to continue to maintain this as a priority. And that's something you'll probably see too in the Iowa League of Cities and Metro Coalition's 21 priorities when those are available as well. We also have, so the REAP grant program, we've benefited from the REAP grant program in recent years. One recent example is ecological restoration at Hickory Hill Park. And then last year we also received some funding to restore native species at Terry Trueblood. So we've seen the benefit that these have here locally, but current state code only authorizes REAP funds until fiscal year 21. So we're just encouraging the state to continue funding this program. We have a couple here related to your goal to foster healthy neighborhoods and affordable housing. So this first one here is probably also familiar to you, fairly straightforward, just recognizing that how cities are often uniquely positioned to innovate and respond to local needs. So we want to continue to be supportive of protecting local control granted by the home rule. And this is one we also typically see on the Iowa League of Cities and Metro Coalition's priorities as well. Next, we are joining with University of Iowa student government in support of legislation which would require the use of rental property move-in checklists as a protection against unfair security deposit withholding. So actually in the last session, Senator Walz introduced a bill addressing this issue and it unfortunately did not move forward, but we would be supportive of resurrecting that bill in the 21 session. This next one actually also had a bill sponsored by Senator Walz in the last session, and it just was a bill that largely came out of the recommendations from the Johnson County Mobile Home Task Force, which I believe released recommendations last year. And locally, we've kind of seen what the impacts are when these kind of communities are bought by large multi-state corporations. And manufactured housing communities are also a really important affordable housing source in our community. So we just want to be supportive of resurrecting this bill as well in the 21 session. And here, so this is another one that we've become kind of aware of as we've seen jobs and schools move online due to the pandemic. And that's just been the inequities in quality and affordable broadband in Iowa City. And not just here, but really across the state too. So we're encouraging the state to invest in the infrastructure and public-private partnerships that would be needed to improve access and affordability for high-speed broadband. And we'd like them to really maintain that focus on our moderate and low-income neighborhoods as well. A couple here that tie to your objective of promoting an inclusive and resilient economy. So this first one is also a priority continued from last year. It's for additional support for our schools. This year, like most things, we're also just asking for an emphasis on any new or pronounced needs due to the pandemic. I'd like to call out one addition here, which is just an emphasis on expanded access, affordability, and quality of early childhood education and childcare. A COVID-19 economic recovery will be very difficult, if not impossible, if households can't enter or stay in the workforce because of childcare barriers. And I guess that kind of leads into our next one, which is just simply recognizing how deeply our community is feeling the impacts of the pandemic, and also recognizing how crucial the state's investment of CARES Act dollars have been to our own operations. So our hope is that any future federal funding or relief packages will also help support cities, support their residents and local businesses in recovery. And then finally, here under strengthen community engagement and intergovernmental relations, in the past, City Council's adopted legislative priorities have typically included support for the efforts of the Iowa League of Cities and Metro Coalition. I alluded to some of those as we've gone along. These are two organizations which we typically tend to be like-minded on a lot of issues. So we have that included there. So that was a really abbreviated version, kind of what we have laid out for you to consider at this point. We'd just like to hear your thoughts so we can prepare a formal resolution for the November 17th meeting.
Thank you for sharing. And counselors, we can just chime in and ask our questions or make any recommendations at the time. I do have questions. Please go right ahead.
I really like the addition of the childcare language because that is really important. That's something we're hearing over and over again. So I was really pleased to see that in there. Thank you.
I know that this is kind of a unique year in some ways, but I wonder if the League of Cities, or specifically the Metro Coalition, if they have any type of initiatives that they're promoting in relationship to either Black Lives Matter or systemic racism. Do we know that they have anything that they're promoting this year?
At the time that we prepared this memo, neither of those two organizations had released their priorities for the 21 session, but we can certainly work with them to try to be on alignment of any of those efforts.
Yeah, I think it'll be important just to learn, where they land on some of those items specifically. Of course, home rule, you're exactly right. Traditionally, they've always kind of promoted that. But I think when we're talking about just the systemic racism, some of the efforts there might be advantageous if we're, not the only city in the state promoting that. So we probably want to make sure that we're making those suggestions and just seeing where other cities will be in promoting it.
Mayor, if I may jump in, I expect a number of cities and maybe the League of Cities and Metro Coalition will really look at the Governor's Focus Committee recommendations pretty hard. And I wouldn't be surprised if those are something that the cities get behind. And then there's also a task force that's been set up between the Iowa Association of Chiefs of Police and the NAACP. And I do not believe that group has made their recommendations public yet, but I would expect that those will come out in the next couple of weeks. So that's another group that we could potentially align with when it comes to our legislative priorities.
Great. Yeah, I think it might be advantageous for us to go ahead and, kind of make some decisions tonight, but realizing that we may come back and want to change some of our language or effort just so that it's in alignment to make it a little more streamlined through the state.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd mention, maybe remind everybody of is, we put these together in November, December, typically every year. And by February, we're really focused on a whole nother set of issues because we're either playing defense on things that are introduced that we didn't expect, or there's new opportunities that come up. So this is really important in that it establishes your values and we can communicate those. It's kind of a good kickoff. But once the game starts, the focus changes quite a bit. At least that's been our recent experience.
I would join Councillor Taylor. I'm very happy to see the focus on childcare. Childcare reimbursement rates are stuck at 2008 rates right now, which does not provide nearly the incentive that various providers need financially in order to take on the people who get childcare funds from the state. And the other thing that I think is really, I mean, there are many important things in here, but one other thing I just wanted to point out was the specialty courts. That could really benefit from a mental health court. And I know that the Iowa judiciary has suffered from a number of years of reduced funding. The state claims to be in a good financial position. It would be a really good year for a number of cities and counties to band together and try and increase funding for that. But mental health court would be a really good pairing with some of the other things we're talking about, as well as the GuideLink Center.
Yep, I was going to mention that civil mental health court as well, and totally agree with what Councillor Weiner just said. And I appreciate also, Mayor, that question about aligning with what some of those other organizations may come out with. But I would say, Rachel, what's prepared in this memo looks good to me and was what I was hoping to see based on the conversations we'd had so far.
Yeah, I'd like to thank staff. It's a very comprehensive list, lots of issues covered. It was nice to see that there was reference to a statewide climate action plan. I think on a number of these issues, the more we can see consistency and alignment from the city through the metro through to the state, it seems whatever the issue may be, it will get better attention and perhaps more acceleration.
I would agree with John. It's very comprehensive, and what's interesting is that it's different than what we have tried to do in a lot of years past in terms of trying to focus on a few issues. But I think this is a very different year and a lot of different things on our plate that really I think are important for us to put out there as priorities, even if we don't see much movement at the state level. And I would concur with everybody else. The more alignment we can have with the other cities in the state, the better.
Yeah, and I just add really briefly that we don't know what the state legislature is going to look like. We will presumably within a day or two, and that could really change some of the things that we're able to help push forward this year.
All right, well, sound like we have some direction from council on this. So thanks, Rachel, for doing this, and we really appreciate it. And we'll have it on our agenda next meeting. So, all right, we'll move on to, unless there's anything else, we'll move on to COVID-19. Any updates there?
No updates from staff, but we're happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, we know that Halloween just finished, and we also know that there will be some holidays coming up. And so just to people out there, we want, of course, the celebrations we know will happen. We just want people to be aware of COVID-19 is still present in our community, and do what you can to protect yourself. Wearing a mask is very important. It's proven to be probably the best defense in addition to hand washing and staying 6 feet away. So just want to make sure that people are adhering to those and keep it in the forefront of their minds.
So my propensity for talking about COVID hasn't gone away. Our numbers are spiking statewide. We've been, relatively speaking, because I believe of the face covering mandate, fairly fortunate in Johnson County so far. But our numbers aren't in the 10s and 20s anymore. They were at 53 today. They were at 80 or 90 the other day, or 60. it's a serious matter, and it's a serious matter statewide. We're hitting record hospitalizations in the state every single day for the past number of days. UIHC is ending up with patients from all over the state. And it's gotten to the point where the CEO of UIHC put an op-ed in the local papers, in the Press Citizen, and spoke to reporters from the Gazette as well. And he said that we are again in danger of losing control of this pandemic in Iowa. Our COVID positivity rate skyrocketed twice before, but this is the first time that we've seen rates this high while also dealing with record patient hospitalizations. And it will require immediate behavior modification by each one of us. If COVID cases continue to increase on this same trajectory, the healthcare system as we know it will look very different in 30 days. And I don't think that's anything any of us want. There are some hospitals in North and North Central Iowa that currently have 0 beds available. So he exhorts Iowans to avoid indoor in-person gatherings. As you said, Mayor, to wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart from those you don't live with, wash your hands frequently. And then I had a brief conversation with Dr. Jorge Salinas at UIHC, Chief Epidemiologist, who echoed that and also stressed that we really should be limiting indoor gatherings limit gatherings at all to no more than 25 people. So we as a city don't have the power to impose any of that, but you know, as tired as we all are of this, the virus isn't getting tired of it. So please do whatever you can.
Yes, it is certainly serious out there, and I appreciate you chiming in on that as well.
And to echo what Janice said about the hospitals, I still know several nurses that work there, and they say the ones that are there, the COVID patients are there, are very, very ill. They're on the ventilators, they're needing the ventilators, and this is very serious, and people need to keep believing that it's a serious issue, but to stay well, stay safe, and follow the guidelines. Please follow the guidelines.
All right. Well, we will continue to do what we can to promote COVID seriousness within our community. And we just ask that people really do what they can to keep themselves and others safe. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Black Lives Matter movement and systemic racism. I do know that we have so there's a lot, you know, a part of this. So I wonder if we didn't take a little time just to look at the, I think it's in our 1029 info packet, just the status report of the Black Lives Matter and systemic racism. I'll kind of look at that report. I know that our city manager, Jeff, had a memo for affordable housing as well, which we could also potentially bring up during this time and talk about that. But I thought we might want to just take a moment and just look at where we are with everything on that report, just to make sure that we're on task. And if we need to accelerate anything or review anything, we can do that now. Are people comfortable with that? All right, if I can share my screen, because I do believe I have it up. Let me see. All right, are you all seeing the progress summary? Okay, great. Great. All right, so I'll just go up here a little bit to the, I don't know, I tend to go up here and look at every item and then go down below. So maybe we'll just start up top and just go down below, and then just jump in and give some comments about where we think we are. So first is the development a preliminary plan to restructure Iowa City PD towards community policing. We have tasked that to the city staff, city manager's office, and then we'll be getting that report. I think the latest is in December. So
I think as a part of that, I mean, we're doing things as we go along also as in addition to the greater restructuring. But I'd really like to point out the memo or that was in our packet and then it's been released to the public about the approach toward traffic enforcement and the changed approach for at least a pilot program, which is very similar to what they were doing in Lansing, Michigan, which strikes me as a really positive approach.
yes. And I wonder if Jeff can just mention a little bit about, I don't know that we have the interim police chief here.
Yeah, Chief Brotherton's on the call here. Denise, do you want to talk a little bit about that traffic memo?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, so we instituted this back last week on October 29th, and it is a pilot project, but it's something that we hope works well and that we'll continue to implement. And, you know, it's focusing more on those safety violations that we want our traffic focused on and not equipment violations, though those can be a safety related issue. And so if you read through it, you'll see we divided them up between primary and secondary. Now, we still want to maintain public safety. And so there will be times that, you know, a stop could be made, but they'll have to articulate why they made that secondary stop and how that applied to the bigger picture of public safety. We've had lots of discussions with the officers and their understanding of it and feel that they can do their jobs and continue to, you know, keep our streets safe and you know, make sure that everyone feels like they're treated fairly and that our intentions are based on community safety.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we'll be getting a report from as to what those efforts look like, I guess. Is that a 6-month trial period?
So we didn't put a timeline on it. We have in 60 days, we'll be looking at the data and so we'll be looking for compliance. And then we'll be also looking, how does this affect street safety? Do we see our collisions going up? That's our main focus. You know, what a lot of equipment violations are stopped for is at night. You know, where they may stop that tail light out and you'll have the drunk driver that you may not have stopped where they could have gotten to a crash later. That's what we'll be looking at. Do we see some of those crashes increasing in those late night hours because we're not getting some of those drunk drivers? Because the overall, what do we want? Again, public safety, we want to keep our crashes down. That's why we conduct traffic stops. So that's what we'll be looking. Did it make that big of a difference and not making these secondary violation stops? You know, did it affect our crash rates? And that is really our main focus. Does it affect our OWI rates? And then again, we'll also want to look at compliance, which, you know, I feel we won't have an issue with. The officers are understanding of it. And it is, as we looked at the data, a small portion of the stops that are actually made are for those secondary in equipment violations.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to quickly make a few comments on this. You know, my understanding was I think referenced as a 60-day pilot, something to that effect. So I think that's fine. You know, let's look at how things, you know, the data changes over that period. I did have some comments though related to some of the items that are still considered primary violations. And in my mind, this wasn't a question of necessarily no longer doing the enforcement, but how do we do the enforcement? And is it possible to provide the enforcement without necessarily doing so with a traffic stop? And so a few of the things that fell under that category for me under primary violations would be things like the expired license plates, the 2 or more inoperable tail or brake lights, possibly the failure to wear seatbelt or child restraints. It seems like some of these things could be addressed by the field operations, where they would note the violation and then contact the owner of the vehicle through the mail that such a violation took place, rather than having the traffic stop. And part of my feeling about that is that the risks involved with the traffic stop, if it's not something that seems to have a significant impact on safety, are there ways we can enforce the law without having that traffic stop, which from the data I was reading is considered to be the most dangerous interaction our police officers have with the public, followed by domestic violence calls. For example, I ran across a statistic that between 2000 and 2009, 118 police officers were killed as a result of traffic stops. So it's not just the violence that could occur with of police on the public, but of public on the police. So my hope is we can try to come up with ways in which we can use technology to help us with traffic law enforcement. And of course, when it gets more into the moving violation issues, that clearly requires police action. But we still have what I would call equipment failure type stuff that's considered to be a primary traffic violation.
I would just like to note that those are after dusk, and that's why they became primary when you have those lights out, because that's a significant safety issue. You can't see the back of a car or the headlights aren't on. And I would just add with the seat belts that making that stop and having the person put the seatbelt on may save them down the street if they get in a crash. So it doesn't always end up in a citation. Sometimes we can just fix that problem right there, or they know they can get that, we can give them that bulbs ticket, or if it's someone that isn't in that situation, just didn't know those lights were out. Or sometimes you have those newer cars where you don't know your headlights are on, it looks like they are, and if we're stop them and they can switch those headlights on real quick. And so we can prevent a crash, because that's our ultimate goal, is really to prevent those crashes and those lights on and those seat belts on and those kids in those car seats. Sometimes we can help get the kid in the car seat or get them right away to the fire department to get a car seat. And we can get that done really quickly before someone gets hurt.
Great. All right. We'll move on to the next one. And this is receive a report from the ICPD involvement in the use of tear gas and flashbang devices. So we have this, do we have any updates on where we are?
I don't have any updates other than to say I know that they are making progress because we're aware that they've been conducting interviews. So the 90 days was that clock really started in September. So I think we're getting pretty close, but I don't have a date from the OAR group yet.
Okay. Increase accountability and oversight authority of CPRB where legally possible. We do have this a part of our legislative priorities. And I know that there's been, in some of the reports from CPRB, some of their efforts or discussions as well on this.
Yes, that commission is actively putting together recommendations for council consideration.
Great. improve transparency and accessibility of detailed ICPD budget expenditures. I believe that's still on our website. Is that correct?
Yeah, we put up some additional information on the current budget, and then once we get through the budget this year, we'll expand on that with the new budget.
And then this says the review of inventory of military grade equipment in Iowa City PD. I know that we had listed the materials, but we really haven't had a conversation about the inventory. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that information was in your packet probably a month and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that was marked as done on, as you scroll down, and I guess I thought it was because we had the memo from the city manager on that. We had that opportunity to discuss it. I don't recall if we did much discussion, and then the MRAP letter was sent. So my understanding was, as the chart indicates, that one is done.
Yeah, I guess for me, what I recall, of course, we saw the list of material. What I recall from the conversation is, one, we still have a study coming back, and we're asking a part of that study, what can we use? Should something like, should we have an event where we need to crowd control, if that's the most appropriate term to use? Because I personally didn't feel educated enough to make decisions on what are appropriate equipment to use. If there should be an attack on a specific group or on our city. So we need to ensure that we have something, some tools that we can utilize if needed, but I just didn't feel educated personally on what to keep and take away. Is it fair to say that this is something that we're waiting for the report back on the event of June, and hopefully see what the recommendations are there?
Yeah, Mayor, we have one more use of force kind of review left. So we made some initial changes, to our use of force policy in the police department. But we still need to go back into that use of force policy and really focus on use of force during protests, and really kind of defining what the available resources are to the department, what the appropriate resources are, what's a peaceful protest, what's not a peaceful protest. I mean, those are really tough discussions that we need to have. And I think it makes sense that we do that after the OAR report is in hand, so that there's a better understanding of exactly what happened on that day. And then, yes, any recommendations that group has for alternative approaches, training, best practices, that sort of thing, would be great to incorporate. This is something that a lot of police departments across the country are talking about. So I imagine there'll be other policy updates from across the country that we can look at as well in a few months.
Okay. So then the next one is general order to expressly ban the use of chokeholds and any maneuver that cuts off oxygen or blood flow. We did that. And then Iowa City Police Department policy and practice to consider with Iowa House File 2647, ensuring police officers in Iowa have not committed serious misconduct.
Mayor, this is one, we have the policy and practice in place, but there was a new state law passed late spring, early summer, and we're waiting for the rules of that new law to come out, just so we can make sure that we're going to follow the proper state reporting mechanisms. So again, this is one that I feel like we're already there 100%, but there's going to be some new reporting communication requirements on cities and police departments. Once those are released, we'll be able to ensure that we're compliant and then move this over to the fully accomplished. It's just not something that's within our control as far as the time frame goes.
Great. The next one is investigate compliance and evaluate disciplinary action related to proper use of body cameras and vehicle recording devices.
This has been done.
Mm-hmm. And the next is ensure the duty to intervene and stop excessive force in both ICPD general order and an MOU with an area law enforcement agency. So I know we did this. We sent that out to other law enforcement agencies. And then prohibit use of tear gas, rubber bullets, and flashbangs against peaceful protesters. That was city directives to our police department. That's been done. Adopt 2021 state legislative priorities. And we just did this. And of course, it talked about enhanced authority for the CPRB and decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana. That was also included in that language. So we've done that.
Can I just interrupt for a second to clarify? When I look at the chart, which for me is easier to go by because it shows what is and isn't done, it doesn't show the tear gas, rubber bullets, flashbangs. I thought that was still something we would be talking about more after this report came back. That's not something that's been actually completed, is it?
So I
if you
think it's
scroll
in the
down,
middle.
If it follows the same word note right there, yeah, it's not done. It's still in process because won't part of that come out of this report and some of that further discussion?
Correct. That's what I was alluding to earlier, is that's really what we need to do, is we need to go back into the use of force general order and make changes. What the amendment to the use of force was that was already done has to do with those airway restricting maneuvers and the chokeholds. So we did that right away, but we have to go back in a second time to address crowd control protests and those types of incidents.
Right. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah. And I can go off the bottom if that is easier for people to see.
I don't know that it's easier to see, but I think for public that are watching on Zoom, if they haven't looked at our packet, I think it might be helpful for them to be seeing this as we're talking about it, because then they can also see the chart and how we have the chart marked in terms of where we are, rather than just listening to the discussion. They can see it visually, might be helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll continue here. Everyone can see the chart, and then awaiting council action is the first column. Planning or action currently underway is the second. And then some or all actions accomplished is the third column. So then we're at the Truth and Reconciliation, develop Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and we are underway with that. We have November 10th, if I recall, by 5 p.m. is when anyone interested in being a part of that commission, application needs to be submitted to the city.
Please apply.
Yes.
Any of you out there who are interested, please put in applications.
Yep. All right. And then 1 million committed to the social justice, racial equity efforts and affordable housing plan. We do have a memo from Jeff. I don't know if we want to bring that up now or just save that for later in the discussion now. We'll come back to that affordable housing plan. All right. But that is underway. And then the $1 million commitment to social justice, racial equity efforts. We haven't totally started to earmark those funds as council, but I anticipate that we'll be utilizing those funds really quickly when some of these commissions and some of the affordable housing plans get underway. Equitable recruitment, hiring, staff training.
This is a tricky one. I don't know where to put the circle, so to speak, on this one, because it's been something that we've been doing for 5 years, and it's going to be something we're going to be doing forever going forward. I don't think you're ever done with this one, but technically we've provided council with the information that you requested about our changes we've made to hiring processes and recruitment processes, about our workplace demographics. You have all that information, and in one of those documents, we even kind of foreshadowed some of the additional things that we'll be looking at this coming year. So you could move this over to complete, but I think we all just need to know it's never it's never complete.
Any follow-up thoughts on this?
I guess my thought would be to leave it as in process and not put it in the complete column, because I think it would be easy for somebody to look at this and see it marked as complete and think that we're no longer working on it. So while it may look like we haven't accomplished what we set out to do right now, as Jeff said, they've given us a report on the things that have been done and are ongoing. And we just need to understand and help communicate that to the public that this is never going to stop. This will always be an ongoing issue. So I think if we kind of keep it in that column, it helps keep our eyes on it also.
We almost need a column that just says ongoing, continuing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some things I think you're correct. It'll be ongoing and continuing. Such as the next one, which is the Racial Inequity Toolkit expansion of use in education. That's something that I think will continue to be used ongoing, but also educating as well. The next is increase art plus celebrations of communities of color. And so this is kind of in the actions in progress. I'm not certain. I guess it's still in the waiting city council action. And a lot of that has to do with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I believe it was tasked to them to do some celebrations.
Yeah, so this one's again, get 2 markers on there. We've started. Your Public Art Advisory Commission has been working hard on this, and you've seen a little bit of that work filter up your way. But the specific language in the resolution also calls for a public festival dedicated to the celebration of Black culture, and that's what we're really waiting on that direction from. And I don't know if that's gonna. If council wants to have a conversation about that, or if that's something that you'd ask the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to consider during their deliberations. But that's one. I guess what we're trying to signal with that one is that staff is not actively working on a festival of that nature. That we're looking for a little bit more direction from somebody on that.
I think personally that can go under the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other comments? And then the last is establish Juneteenth as an official city holiday. I know that there was some, I don't know where the city is with this, because I understand with the number of holidays already agreed upon with the union. I'm not sure if this has been kind of solidified, finalized.
Yeah, this one, I'd say we're 80% of the way there maybe. And hopefully by the time you meet again, this will be a done deal. We have holidays are bargained, and we have 3 collective bargaining units. And so it's just been working with each of those units who have been very receptive to the idea. But they have to get votes of their membership. They have to get feedback from their membership, and we have to develop side letters to address that in the bargaining agreements themselves. So we've got one more union to finalize that with, and I hope that that's done here in the next week or so, and then we'll get that announcement out.
Okay. All right. Well, it doesn't look like anything actually moves on this chart. Once we do our legislative priorities, that'll move. That looks like that's going to be in the near future. There's a few others in the near future. Some does require the OAR report before it can move. But all right. We've gone through that just to get us a little bit up to speed on that. Any additional comments anyone would like to say? If not,
I would. I'm sorry, I was slow to click the unmute button. I would just like to, thank staff for, the efforts that they've made to do an awful lot of the heavy lifting since we passed the resolution. Obviously, Councilors Weiner and Burgess on the Truth and Reconciliation Ordinance, but I think it's helpful, and I appreciate, Mayor, you're taking the time to go through this item by item tonight, because I think it's easy for the public to feel like we haven't really done anything, or we're deliberately slowing things down or whatever. And I would say to people, please try to have faith that we hear you. We heard you this summer. We still hear you. We're trying to work on this. We are working on this. A lot of these things do take time, but I think we've gotten an awful lot accomplished in a relatively short period of time. I think the public input sessions that we had this fall were very helpful and very much appreciated by the members of the public that came. And we're going to continue. We're not letting this stuff slide. We take it very seriously, and we're going to continue with that. So while it takes a while to go through every single one of these items, probably it's a good thing to do. Maybe one meeting a month. It maybe doesn't need to take this long every single time, but to kind of run through those and refresh everybody's mind where we are, what we've gotten accomplished, and kind of what things are on people's plate as we move forward. Because I feel really strongly that this council and our staff take all of this very seriously and very, very committed to continuing to work on it.
right. All right. If nothing else, we'll do clarification of agenda items. Hearing none, we will go to October 22nd information packet. And we do have from there, and maybe we'll go ahead and do that now as well, is the proposed council meeting schedule. So while people are thinking about what they want to talk about from that packet, I'll just bring up the schedule for the January through April 2021. I think everything is our typical Tuesday through Tuesday sessions, first and third Tuesdays of the month.
I was just going to ask a question. I haven't, well, actually, is the university having spring break? Or I was going to start to ask if that 16th was during spring break, and then some schools are canceling spring break, and now I'm forgetting if Iowa has.
I think they canceled it. I mean, I don't know. Do we have is Ryan there? But thought that I remember they canceled.
Yes, the University of Iowa did cancel spring break for this year, and so they're adding an extra week to winter break. So we come back, I think that last week of January now. And then we also have 2 like random off days, one in March and one in April, I believe.
Okay, thank you. I was just questioning that March 16th, just making sure that we weren't hitting spring break, but I was thinking that was canceled. I really appreciate the way scheduling is done for the budget. I think we've managed to condense this somewhat from what it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. So I know it's a lot of work for staff, and I know from Jeff's Friday memo, they're deep into that right now, getting all that ready for us. So it makes for a couple of longer days, but that Saturday for our special work session, and then that following Tuesday, just combining that CIP session with our regular meeting certainly makes the scheduling easier. So as far as I'm concerned, the schedule looks fine.
I personally would like to propose that we move the first Saturday, the department budget Saturday, and to the following Saturday, which will be the 9th of January. I can give all types of reasons and rationales, but I think for the sake of everybody having a little opportunity not to rush back if they're out of town, with family, staff included, because the first is the day before. So that would be my recommendation. I don't know if any other counselors would support that, or if staff has any thoughts or comments about moving that.
It's not a concern to staff at all. That it works just the same for us. Ultimately, there is a firm end date in which you have to have your budget adopted, and staff needs a few weeks prior to that to prepare everything and get the state forms ready. So I think the only risk to it is you take a week out from that time frame, which just shortens your deliberation period.
I'm fine with going with the 9th if that's the preference of the majority, but I can work with either one. I hear the mayor's point. If people do want to do any traveling, and with the holiday, since the holiday's on Friday, to have that entire weekend and not have to be rushed back. I also hear the city manager's point, and we may have some tough discussions. So I think in any event, I think we need to be prepared that we might have to schedule a special meeting to get through all of our discussions on the budget.
One thing I might add is that in the month of January, we do have 5 Saturdays and not 4, if that helps anyone. But
Well, when you put it that way, that sounds pretty reasonable. I would go either way too. Either the 2nd or the 9th would be fine. But as Susan said, be aware that we may, since this is kind of a different times now, we may have to throw another meeting in there somewhere during the week.
Fine with either the 2nd or the 9th also.
I joined the wishy-washy crew. It doesn't really matter. So.
okay. So is it fair to say that we'll look at the 9th as being the Saturday when we camp out all day?
Yeah, let's give everybody that holiday weekend.
Great.
Good suggestion.
Great. And then, so what about the CIP budget meeting? Do we want to just push that through the 19th? Do we want to have, a special meeting for that?
Does it really matter to you, Jeff, which order we do them in? I mean, I know this would be different than we normally do it, but does it really matter?
No, it really doesn't matter. I'd suggest you just keep it on the 5th.
All right, we'll do it. Okay. Okay. All right. So I think Kelly got that and Jeff got that change. Any other items on 1022 information packet people want to bring up?
Just relating to our December schedule and can we expect that the work session on the 15th will include the preliminary plan for the police department? And is that enough time?
Yeah, so my goal would be to get that report out in the information packet that precedes the 15th. But I hate to, I know there's a lot of work to do to pull this plan together. So if I don't meet that December 10th deadline, then I would actually be releasing it on the 15th in a special packet. And I'd be happy to kind of, walk you through that at your work session, but I just don't expect that you'll have a whole lot of time to really review it. And frankly, even if it comes out on the 10th, you're probably going to struggle to review it all because it's going to be fairly lengthy.
It is a preliminary plan, and we put that word preliminary in there for a reason.
Maybe a different way of asking the question is, do we want to have a meeting where we actually have a chance to go through it?
Yeah, it's really up to you and how you want to process that. It's going to be a fairly lengthy document. And if you prefer to have a little bit of time just to kind of read that yourselves and then talk about it, that's fine. If you'd rather have me kind of walk you through at a high level what the sections are and what kind of the higher level recommendations are, I'm happy to do that on the 15th or any other date.
I think doing that on the 15th, to have the city manager really kind of walk us through it, and kind of give us his take on, where we need to maybe focus our energies and efforts in looking at it and the real new pieces, et cetera. It might be helpful before we spend hours reading it and diving through it as well. So even if we don't get it till the 15th and don't have a chance to really spend a lot of time reading it, I think his introduction to it could be very helpful. And then, we've got the holiday along with our budget that we can just spend on city business.
That sounds like a good plan to me, if other people are agreeable to that. And then just making sure that we move into the new year with our new police chief will be coming on, I think the second week in January, if that's right. And just making sure that we have some plan to circle back so that we're actually addressing the plan and evaluating it moving forward in the new year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that works. At least for me, I think the public weighing in on it is pretty important as well. And so if, the preliminary plan, I assume probably won't totally be voted on, it'll just be discussed, which is good. And then we'll be able to get input from the community, and then council will be able to make some final decisions and deliberate as to what we want. So I think this would be a good plan, just realizing that public will have an opportunity to weigh in.
Yeah, I really think this is a plan that you modify and adopt in the spring. It's not going to be something that you're going to want to adopt in January or probably even February, because it's just going to take a lot of time for the community to kind of soak it in and raise additional thoughts that they have, and for you all to consider those. So definitely don't feel rushed about this one. That plan needs to breathe a little bit before you put the final stamp on it.
All right. Anything else before we move on to information packet 1029? So there's two items from information packet that we want to go through, and that's IP6 and IP8. While people are gathering their thoughts on any other item that they want to discuss, why don't we go ahead and have our city manager, Jeff Ruin, kind of just update us on the affordable housing plan that was submitted, the memo there.
Yeah, I'll be pretty brief here. The council asked for staff to put together kind of a framework, how to go about the plan. And most of the council members have been a part of a number of different planning efforts and know there's a couple of ways to go about it. You know, one of the more traditional ways is to hire a consultant and have the consultant lead you through a public process and compile it. Those processes can be valuable, and we've used them for a number of master plans that we've done that have been very successful, but they're also very time consuming. I mean, just the process of selecting a consultant is going to take you 4 to 5 months usually. So with this one, I think as staff, we recognize we have a lot of really knowledgeable and talented people here in the community that are passionate about affordable housing. And so we feel confident that we could get a committee together, much like we did for the inclusionary zoning ordinance in Riverfront Crossings. So it's not even a council appointed committee, which, as you know, carries with it time and effort to put together based on what you've recently done with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But this would be more of a staff-led committee where we're bringing people in that we think could be really effective in developing a plan and letting that group develop a set of recommendations that we ultimately present to you. I think we'd be able to do it fairly quickly. And I know that there's a lot of people in this community that would love to kind of be a part of that planning process. So from a basic step standpoint, we would want to have an initial work session with you just so we can make sure we're understanding your expectations of the plan. What is it that you're hoping to address? What's kind of the tolerance or desire to increase the budget considerably? I mean, it's helpful to know, are we kind of working at a status quo budget and thinking about how we use existing resources better? Or are we dreaming a little bit bigger and hoping that we'll be able to provide more funding behind it? We would then spend a little bit of time pulling together a committee, and then using some of the early 2021 census updates from the American Community Survey to really just make sure we're all working off the same data and that we're understanding what the current situation is and what the trends are in the community. We would take a look back at how we've been spending money. We would develop a public input strategy and really look to have some good, meaningful public input sessions in the community. And then with this plan, I think it would be really helpful to be very intentional about the programs that we're developing or policies that we're thinking about, to really focus in on those different income levels of the spectrum. So what are we really thinking at for those 0 to 30% area median income households versus the 30 to 60% versus 60 to 100%, almost kind of develop strategies for each of those segments. What would be the top 2, 3, 4, 5 strategies for each of those income brackets, and then weave those into a final plan at the end. A couple of other things that we really want to look at would be the regulatory piece of this. This is kind of that one piece of our initial plan that we never fully got to, but really looking at how do we make more of the housing decisions by right and a little bit easier. And that's going to be looking again at local and state regulations. And then I think it would be really helpful to look at non-housing related burdens on households and really try to do some type of analysis to make sure that the dollar spending in affordable housing maybe couldn't go a little bit further and help those same families in a place like like childcare or transportation, because it can be really expensive to make that progress with affordable housing. And so I'm not by no means saying that we shouldn't be investing there, but I think we should be looking also at the total household cost burden and not just housing. How does transportation play into that? How does healthcare play into that? And just see if there's some strategies that might stretch our dollars a little bit better and provide the same relief or similar relief to those households in the community. With might be a little bit ambitious, but I would like to try to get back to you in October with a set of recommendations. So really, I think what we're looking for tonight from you all is kind of does the process make sense? Or are you looking for something a little bit more similar to that first scenario I described, which is let's hire a consultant who can kind of guide us through this process and maybe spend twice as much time on it, but maybe get a better product or maybe a more comprehensive set of perspectives based on their expertise and maybe their knowledge of other communities.
I guess my thought is your comment, Jeff, about, we have a lot of expertise in this community and people who are dedicated in this and put a lot of time into this. And I think maybe have a better sense of what can work in this community. Not to say that consultants couldn't bring us some other ideas, but I think to spend, maybe twice as long by the time we go out and hire consultants and pay that money when we're at a time of also kind of wondering what our budget's going to look like over the next 2 to 3 years. I'd rather start using this approach. It doesn't mean that we can't in the future, go back out and say, hey, we've done this, we've tried this, we need to do more. And maybe the next time around we do consultants, but I'm comfortable with what staff has proposed. I think it allows us to get an awful lot of input, use the resources we have in the community. And I really like the idea of breaking down by the 3 segmentations of median income to look at different strategies for each of those. I think that's really a good idea as well.
I liked your comment, Jeff, too, about the non-housing cost burdens. And I think when we're looking at this affordable housing plan, we do have to look at the whole big picture. We can give them all the money they need for housing, but they could still be really challenged when it comes to some of the other costs in their life. Childcare, and you mentioned healthcare, can really blow people out of the water financially. So I think that's a good point to also keep that in mind.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the household concept is an important one. And for example, typically I think housing and transportation are the 2 largest household expenses. And I've often felt that that's really the framework we should be looking at, is trying to identify ways to reduce household expenses as it relates to both of those items, rather than simply looking at the affordable housing component. For example, if we can get if a household consists of 2 adults and we can get the transportation down to 1 automobile as opposed to 1 automobile per adult, that's a significant change in the household expenses. I mean, that's a major reduction. So if we can advance our transportation systems in such a way that households can have that choice, you're talking very, very possibly $600 to $700 a month in reduced household expenses. I think another way of trying to bring in the work of I agree that I think we should try this sort of in-house, so to speak, or with our own resources. I think it would also be helpful to be looking at studies that and programs that have been done elsewhere to try to learn from those exercises. In a way, it would be bringing in, the lessons learned from those programs. And I've mentioned to counselors the Invest Des Moines as one example. Cedar Rapids has some programs. A number of cities have programs that we could be looking at and trying to learn from.
But in the age of Zoom, as we seem to be in endlessly, we can bring in to meetings potentially experts from around the state and even around the country, potentially, depending on where we end up. I think this idea is, if it turns out we need something, we could potentially have hire someone as a facilitator to get all these folks working together. But I did want to ask when you list the people or the groups that you would include, Jeff, Under local housing advocates, does that include all was that sort of a catch-all for all the local groups such as the Affordable Housing Coalition, Habitat for Humanity, and so forth?
Yeah, and I'd say with this memo, I was really trying to be focused on the how, not the who. I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with the process. And I listed those kind of 8 categories, although I'd said, the commission is probably 10 to 12 people, so you might double up in some of those areas. But number 1 is the Iowa City nonprofit housing providers and funders. So that's going to be a subset of groups. And then you've got local housing advocates on there too. I didn't name specific organizations because I really didn't want that to be the focus tonight. I did list the realtors, the apartment association, and the home builders. And kind of what my distinction was in my mind there is that I really look at those 3 groups as being spokespersons for that entire industry. And I just wasn't sure that there was one group that spoke for all the nonprofit kind of housing providers and funders and advocates out there. So I left that pretty general. But if this framework's acceptable, we would start to drill down and really identify the folks that can are one, excited to contribute, and 2, that would have a lot to offer. So I guess the short answer is yes, they all get kind of lumped into that number 1 and number 8.
I think for me, at least with the number 1 and number 8, specifically who's going to be under those groups is pretty important, because we've had so many people in our community that are, really moving the needle when it comes down to affordable housing. And Councilor Weiner just mentioned Affordable Housing Coalition, Habitat for Humanities, and then even Ellen McKay Group. These are people that have done a lot of hard work in our community. And so I would anticipate that they would want to be a part of this group. I don't know that for certain. But how do we plan to make sure that there's space for some people that we know have been pillars in this community? Because potentially we wouldn't be able to have everyone on here. And the other thing that I think is missing from this group is the Iowa City Community School District, because I think affordable housing really is important to them for various reasons. And so having them on, a part of this group, I would think it's pretty important as well.
I guess my thought would be, I think if what we're looking for here is a group to help come up with a solution, and I'm not sure if that's the right word, but ways to address the problems of affordable housing. I guess I've got 2 points. One, I'm not sure that the school district needs to be a part of this. Obviously, they are impacted by it. They have clearly in the past, given us information in terms of how concentration of low income families and students affects the school district in terms of how they use their resources. So I think we want to engage with them and have those understandings, but I'm not sure that they're necessarily the people that necessarily have the time and energy to help, quote, solve the problem. And I realize we're not actually solving it. We're trying to move the needle on it. And secondly, I understand where Jeff is coming from in terms of trying to focus the conversation tonight on the process, not the who of it that is selected. I think those are conversations we can have later. And we probably all got phone calls from the same people, or at least one person who wants to make sure that they're named to this. And so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole tonight. I want to focus on, are we comfortable with his recommendations of how we move forward with this? And I am, and I trust our staff to know the local housing advocates and nonprofit providers, and who will work well with other people and who will be strong um, participants in this. And obviously we can all talk to Jeff offline about who we think he ought to be considering. But I'm really comfortable with what's been presented to us tonight.
And I guess personally, I'm very comfortable with how this will play out as far as like people coming together. It'll be led by staff. I think going that route is fine. I am a little concerned about actually who will be a part of this. And I think as counselors, we know that affordable housing in our community is a big deal. And we have people that's been working hard. And so whether that is, we give it back to staff and then staff bring us who that final list is. But then the steering committee, I think I think that's important for us to know what that steering committee will be, who will be there on the steering committee. Potentially, there could be, something that is a red flag for one of us that we need to, alert everybody to, because, I don't know, or there's someone missing from here, from the steering committee, that probably didn't have the information about, or staff wasn't thinking about when they were doing the selection. I mean, either honest oversight or just someone that they thought would not be appropriate for this portion of the group, but counselors think different. So I guess we can certainly give it back if, Jeff want the green light on this. I think I hear a majority of staff or counselors saying, I give you the green light. But I do believe that, me personally, I want to know who is on here for final approval, or for final input.
I think the one challenge there's a fine line here, because if the council appoints a committee and asks for recommendations from that committee, then you're getting into an official commission, and then you're triggering the all the processes that come with that. Again, you just went through that with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So I've got no problem. And if you look at this list of 8 and you say there's a certain organization or a certain person you want on there, then I think just let me know. But I don't think you can name a steering committee or kind of have final say in a steering committee and still and then not have that committee kind of be a committee of council. It's just a real fine line there. So again, if I'm missing somebody specific that you want on there, or if it's a school district or whatever the case may be, that's fine. I think you can do that. I just don't think you want to get to the point where you're going to be naming every person, unless you want to take that next step and formalize it into kind of an ad hoc planning committee.
I think for me, what's really important is a mechanism to include wide, like really broad input. And so what I see in the memo that you've provided, Jeff, is that it would include, a public input strategy as part of this group. And I think as long as that understanding happens early enough in the process so that those who would be positioned to provide input to really help in making plans going forward know that the process is happening and can, sort of help self-select. Because part of my concern is, for myself, I think I heard a lot during, before I was on council about affordable housing. And I think I have a general idea of those who are most active in that realm. But, I think talking to the providers and talking to those people about who else do we need to include in forming that commission, I do trust that staff would do that in an inclusive way. And that would be my request, that just to make sure that happens, rather than us naming specific groups. And Mayor, I don't know if that gets to kind of what you were talking about or not close enough.
I mean, I don't want to make a huge deal out of it, except I personally would like to know who's selected for the group. And so I understand that staff we walk that fine line of creating a commission, and I do respect that. And I don't have any worries that some of the pillars within our housing won't be included. I really don't have that worry, but I would like to know who's on there. So,
I guess one question I have is what we're doing tonight. Item 1, City Council work session to establish expectations, or is that something at some point in the near future?
No, that would be a separate work session. We'd probably develop a number of guiding questions for you to help us just get off to the right start.
Because one thing I'll just put forward now, because I think it does relate to the question of who might be involved in this, and that is allowing for a process whereby we can employ a kind of a district concept to the strategy, so that we're looking at a specific neighborhood or geographic area, whether we want to call it a neighborhood or a district, as a way of framing the affordable housing effort and building on it, so that it's not simply about the housing, but it's also about trying to incorporate the assets that a particular area of Iowa City have, taking advantage of those assets in the process of looking at ways to address the affordable housing question, but also as we are kind of expanding this notion of, looking at household, the holism of the household as it relates to affordability, the impacts of neighborhoods or a neighborhood or district on how that particular part of Iowa City would be able to incorporate and build on an affordable housing strategy, which again, I've seen in other cities and towns that have looked at questions of affordability. So you would, in effect, be trying to address issues of quality of life and neighborhood stability at the same time that you would be providing affordable housing.
all right. Any more comments on this item? Hearing none, we'll go on to IP9. And this is a memo from the interim police chief and police sergeant training and accreditation. So we will, I don't know if interim chief Brotherton is going to lead us through this discussion.
I can get you through it real quick, Mayor, and then Chief Brotherton can answer any questions that you have. If you're not familiar with our accreditation process, that's done through an organization referred to as CALIA, and Sergeant Hart provided some of that background in the memo, just so you have a little better understanding of what CALIA is. We are one of 4% of law enforcement agencies in the country that are certified. It's a big deal in law enforcement to have CALIA certification, and it takes a lot of dedicated resources in-house to do it, because you're constantly reviewing your policies and making sure that they are reflective of the best practices and the evolving practices in law enforcement. Our accreditation process is starting back up, and Chief Brotherton and the team over there picked four, as part of the process, picked four kind of broad categories to focus on this time around. Those are listed in your memo there, but it's the demonstrations we had this past year, officer well-being, minority recruitment, and community policing. And so we're just going to kind of kicking this thing off right now, and the assessors who are external to the police department are going to be conducting interviews on the 16th and 17th of this month, and would like to hear some perspective from elected officials. So we're just seeing if there's any volunteers that our staff can work with to get those scheduled. It's, again, completely voluntary, but if there are a few of you that want to share perspectives and thoughts with the assessors, that goes a long way to this accreditation process.
Should we just let you know our availability for that, Jeff? Or how do you want to?
I think if you just say I'm interested, we'll have someone from the police department, probably Sergeant Hart, just follow up with you via email and get that scheduled.
Great, I'm interested. Thank you.
I'm interested.
I would be interested too.
I am as well, and I actually emailed him because it was in the packet.
Okay.
Yeah, I would be interested as well.
All right, so you have 5. I think you probably have more than enough.
Excellent. I appreciate that. I really appreciate your extra time there.
Great.
And just want to say my thanks too, and we'll get that information to Sergeant Hart. This really does help us keep our mission of excellence in service. So thank you.
Great. Any other comments here? All right. We are at boards and commission reports. So just chime in, whoever is wanting to give a report.
ECOG met last week. Nothing that, I mean, they've gotten a fair amount of CARES Act money, but there's nothing earth shattering to report. They were still waiting on a project that they're trying to get funding for Better Together, and that had not happened yet.
I also think if council is in agreement, we can give any type of general updates that we normally give at the end of our formal meeting, community updates, if council is in agreement.
Community updates, please vote. There's been great early voting. Polls are open all around Iowa from 7 a.m. tomorrow to 9 p.m. You can register same day. You need to bring an ID with you. And please, you can look up your information if you don't know your polling place at the Secretary of State's website and at the Johnson County Auditor's website. It's supposed to be a beautiful day. Coralville and Iowa City are both providing free bus service, as well as a couple of extra shuttles in Iowa City to places that aren't usually served by buses. So please exercise your franchise and vote.
I'll mention an event this coming Friday, November 6th. The Iowa Law Reviews is holding a symposium titled The Future of Law and Transportation. It's an all-day event. And they've invited 14 legal scholars will be participating. And if you're interested, if you were to search under Iowa Innovation Business and Law Center, it would provide information as to how to attend that event.
There's a few things I'll just mention. I did on Thursday, October 22nd, I was a part of, I did a presentation for the Hawkeye Caucus, which is a nonpartisan student organization that focuses on student advocacy. And it was really great to interact with these student advocates. Lots of great questions that they had. And it was also an opportunity for me to present public service within the city operations and opportunities for people through boards and commissions and even through listening posts, how people can become engaged with our city operations. On the 29th, Friday, there was the South District Neighborhood Mural, the ribbon cutting. That was a very exciting event. And it was a beautiful day with great weather, by the way. It was a little chilly, but we got through it. And it was just a great time to celebrate the mural and what that community developed themselves. And then on the 26th of October, I was a part of the Civic, which really is a international visitor leadership program. And thanks to Councilor Weiner and her involvement and introduction, on that, and that topic was really LGBTQ plus, and talking to people from Ukraine. And so it was really interesting to have that opportunity to give some thoughts from my perspective when it comes down to LGBTQ plus and government here in the U.S., and also get my own personal involvement. I was a part of on the 27th, it was an all day, or actually it was from 12 to 6 p.m., a training on advancing racial equity, the role of government. I know that all of the counselors have been invited to be a part of that. It's called GARE, G-A-R-E. And I really recommend this. It really, for me, really had an opportunity to express with other people in government things that you've experienced personally, which are to be confidential, because it really was for you to become very vulnerable and have an opportunity and space for you to really enhance your knowledge on how to operate when it comes down to equality. Other than that, that is all I will mention as of now. I did attend on Thursday the Johnson County and probably JCIC and IFR co-sponsored a meeting, and I attended that virtually on Thursday. That is all the updates that I have, and tomorrow's election day, so I want people to get out to the polls. Any other updates? It is actually a minute after our, oh, we still have time. Any other updates? Hearing none, we will be back at 7 p.m.